Hi everybody, it's Michael here at the Zencade. I want to give you a quick tour of my Major Havoc project as it's developed. What you see right here is the main PCB board from a Major Havoc. This is actually a reproduction. You can tell because it's blue. This is a reproduction bare board that was made by a fellow named Tronic on KLOV, and he made a run of these reproduction boards earlier this year. Late last year, early this year anyway, yeah. So I got this a few months ago. I was really glad to be able to get in on that run because they haven't been reproduced since, and I don't know if he's going to do it again. So I was really glad to be in on it. This, of course, came as a bare board, which I didn't do much with for a few months, and then just a couple of weeks ago, the last little barrier got out of my way, and the universe told me it was time for me to start out on this project. So just over the last 2 weeks or so, I spent a bunch of evenings soldering in all these little passives and all these IC sockets, and there are over 400 little resistors and capacitors. You can see all these little guys here, and we got some voltage regulators, some transistors, some variable resistors, some pots, and all kinds of cool stuff like that. And yeah, it took me quite a bit of time to do it. It was a really fun project, but one that I'm kind of glad I'm finished with. What I did just before I started putting the ICs on is I went ahead and used this power supply right here to hook up 5 volts to the board, just to make sure that I hadn't put any capacitors in backward or anything, and just to make sure all the sockets were getting the right voltages where they were supposed to. And it looks like so far so good. Obviously not a complete test, but so far I'm going to say it is a what tests I have done have been successful. Let me just give you a quick tour of what some of the special components are on this board. Right here we have our quad Pokey eliminator. And for anybody who's done work with Atari products in the past, you know that the Pokey is a special custom chip that Atari used to use, and they put that on everything from arcade PCBs to the 8-bit computers to some of the Atari 7800 cartridges. All had these Pokey chips in it, and it was for keyboards and sound is mainly what they do. And the Major Havoc board originally had the even more rare and hard to find quad Pokey, which is basically 4 Pokeys in one chip body, and that went in this socket right here. Those are very hard to come by nowadays, and actually even the regular Pokeys are not exactly cheap and easy to find. So what we've got is this board right here, which allows you to put 4 of them into that one spot. The next thing we got here is this one is by Vector Labs. This is a replacement for a Lita chip. That is a decoder for things like trackballs and spinners and all that kind of stuff that takes information from at least two sensors on 2 different dimensions, and puts those into, decodes them and turns them into signals that the game can use, in this case for a roller. Also I have the AVG replacement. This one is done by Biltronics, and AVG is the Atari vector generator, and as you might expect, that generates vectors. And you'll find these on pretty much all the color vector games that Atari produced after Tempest. So Gravatar and Quantum and Black Widow, Space Duel, and of course Major Havoc. Those are pretty much the special pieces here. There's a couple little cool updates to this board that were done. I'm going to be putting this into a Tempest, since I have a Project Tempest that I figure is a prime candidate to convert into a Major Havoc. Now, when I say conversion, keep in mind this is not like putting a 60-in-1 or something like that into a game, or taking an old nice vector game and putting a stupid LCD monitor and some kind of cheap Chinese million-in-one board. When Atari released Major Havoc, they only made about 300 dedicated machines, and the rest of them were conversion kits that Atari sold to operators so they could convert either a Tempest, or there was another kit for the Space Duel Gravatar Black Widow style cabinet. And what it came with is an adapter board and the main PCB and all the stuff you would need to use, the artwork and everything like that, to convert your Tempest or your Major Havoc, your Tempest or your Space Duel or what have you into a Major Havoc. And so that is what I'm doing. This is something that Atari actually published a manual for how to do this. So I consider this to be a lot different than jammatizing a cabinet or something like that, which I do think is pretty savage in most cases. Speaking of which, though, I mentioned earlier there was one final obstacle that got out of my way, and that was finding this board right here. This is a Tempest to Major Havoc conversion board. I'm sorry, adapter board. And what this does is this. You plug your Major Havoc in right here, like so, and then this top part here accepts the wiring harness that is in the Tempest. You do that and a few other modifications, and you've got your conversion done. So I found one of these, which I've been looking for. Wasn't even really expecting I would find one, but I did. So that was the impetus that I needed to get going on this project. Right now, I would love to show you guys a test fire. Right behind me is my good known working Tempest. This is the back of it right here. And my plan is to go ahead and pull out the Tempest board that's in there momentarily, because I know everything else works. It's a good working Tempest, and then I can plug this in and troubleshoot the board without having to to keep things as simple as possible. I do have my other Tempest, but that's going to need some work on the monitor, and I want to make sure the AR2 is healthy on that before I put the Major Havoc board in. Unfortunately, there are a couple little tiny, hard to find chips that I ordered about 3 weeks ago that still haven't shown up, and I was really hoping that my mailman typically gets here about 4:45 or 5 o'clock in the evening, and I was really hoping I was going to have those chips so I could slide them in and be able to show you guys a test fire. But for now, all I can do is take a look at this board and then continue waiting. Also, just last night, speaking of the adapter board, as you can see, this holds on. The only thing holding this on is the edge connectors down there, and that when this does go on, it's a little bit floppy and not really terribly secure. So what I did is I fired up the computer and I designed these plastic brackets and then printed them out on my 3D printer. And the way this is going to work is the main PCB slides in right there, and you can see on the second slot is where the adapter board goes, and that just kind of stiffens that up a little bit so that the stress is taken off of this edge connector connection right there. So that's where the Major Havoc project is right now. I also have a control panel that is cut for a roller. I've got a reproduction roller, and then I've got the CPO and the marquee. So that's going to be the rest of the conversion, and maybe we'll probably if I don't have anything else going on tomorrow, I might just do up the control panel while I'm waiting for those last few ICs to show up. Anyway, so that's what I got. That's the status of my Major Havoc project. If you've watched all 8 minutes of this video, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.